Hey, good morning. I'm Tracie Sempier with the Mississippi-Alabama Sea Grant Consortium. And if you are here for disaster meal prep, you are in the right place. We're doing a little bit of experimentation today. We typically teach this class in person, but we've had some requests for it to be virtual. And so we are going to try to make that happen today. So we welcome you. I've got some great folks helping me out today, both online. Christiana Allen, who's up at Jackson State University. Christiana is going to be able to answer any of your questions in the chat box since I won't be able to see that while I'm cooking. And then Melissa Snyder, who is here with me in the room. She's our communications director. She's going to help operate the camera so that then she can get some views of the stove while we're cooking, and hopefully you'll be able to see everything that we're doing. If for any reason you can't, if you could please put that information in the chat box, and then that way Christiana can let us know and we can change the camera view. So again, just welcome, and we really appreciate your interest in this course, and we're going to go ahead and get started. I wanted to tell you a little bit about why we started this class to begin with and why we kind of take our show on the road. As Christiana and I and other extension professionals were in the field, we were finding that many people, when we were going through the Go Kit items and talking about the kinds of things that you might want to have in your Go Kit, especially related to food, that many people were saying, well, it's just kind of gross because we have to take off the top of the can and we just eat it cold. And we were getting those comments actually pretty often. And so we thought, well, actually, there is a better way. If you do lose electricity, there are some recipes that you can use with a one burner camp stove. There's also some recipes that, with a few substitutions, require no electricity. And they're much healthier options and probably taste much better, especially if your family is already under a lot of stress and duress from trying to recover from a disaster. And so that is why we developed this course, and we've had the privilege of working with lots of people now in preparing some meals for their family. So after this, if you have ideas for some meals, maybe some things that you prepare with your family in those situations, please feel free to share those with us because we'd love to have them. So in a disaster situation, you do want to be prepared for at least 72 hours if it is a hurricane event, for instance, which is what we get a lot on the coast. And even for a power outage, you really want to be prepared and have food and water enough for at least 72 hours. What happens, however, is that when the power goes out and we don't have electricity, that makes it very difficult to keep those items fresh. And so one of the things that is very important for people to understand, and hopefully you'll pass along this information to your friends and family, is that if something has been in the refrigerator, if it goes below a 40-degree temperature for more than 4 hours, then especially if it's a meat item, then it's really not going to be safe to eat. So you want your freezer to be set at 0. You want your refrigerator to be set at 40. So typically, if we know there's a storm, for instance, that's coming in, or we think we might lose power, then a lot of times it's very wise to take those cold items from your refrigerator and put them in the freezer, because we know that they last up to 48 hours in the freezer. And that can include breads, that can include cheeses, some of the things that we're going to be using today. And then you have the option to use them a few days later, and then you don't have to worry about foodborne illness. So that's one of the things that I like for people to understand, is that if for some reason you're going to put a lot of things into a cooler during a disaster situation, we know that cooler, even with ice in it, is probably not going to stay at 40 degrees. So you want to have a food thermometer in there at all times just to make sure that you and your family don't get sick. I'm going to be sending you a fun food fact sheet in a follow-up email. This one was produced by the FDA, and this has got some great information about things you can do before the power goes out and things you can do after the power goes out. I really like how it talks you through how you can treat your water if you do go beyond, and there's like a boil water notice. So I think that you'll find this very helpful. And these are just a few quick facts for you to make sure that you keep your food safe. So what I'm going to be using today in the class is a camp stove. This camp stove works on butane. It might look very similar to something that you've seen if you camp a lot or if you were in Scouts. But they now make these butane stoves to be very, very simple to use, and they're very affordable. So I purchased this stove at a local Walmart, and I have visited several local Walmarts in my area here on the coast, and they are available. They're just around $40. And I get this particular one because it has a griddle option. And so let me show you real quickly what that griddle looks like. It's just an attachment that you place on the single burner. So this just gives you a lot of additional options on a one burner for things that you can cook during a disaster situation, or really any situation. So I like this one. I feel like it's worth, if you can afford the 10 extra dollars to get the one with the griddle, I feel like it's worth it, but you also can use a single burner, and I'll give you some options of things you can use if you don't have a griddle. So I want to show you how simple this is to use. So I'm just going to slide the cover off here, and each stove comes packed very nicely. Inside, it has the instructions for you. And then as soon as you take it out, you're going to find the eye to the stove. So, and it's going to be wrapped up like this. I just wanted you to be able to get the full effect so that you can see what it looks like. So you're going to have an eye, and then the only other piece that you're going to have is the actual stove. So this sits right on top, just like that. And now your stove is ready. That's the only two pieces you have to worry about. If you get the griddle sits right on top, and I'm going to show you how that works in a moment. Anyone can work this stove, even a child that you've taught about fire safety. There's a hole here. You open up the side, and this is where the gas goes. This is where your butane goes. So right next to these in Walmart are these little cans of butane. And these burn a lot cooler than something like propane, which you're probably used to from like your grill outside. But with the butane, you can buy these in like packs of 3, packs of 5. I bought a pack of 3. I believe it was $5.97. So they're a couple of dollars for each one. And I have gotten hours and hours and hours worth of use out of each one. I have found that these last a very long time, especially if you're just cooking a meal and then turning off the eye. Now, if you're going to leave the burner on for, the entire day, then you might go through a can of butane. But really, this is going to last you. So I think if you get one pack of 3, then you can probably guess that at least it's going to last you for a day, even if you cook 3 meals in a day. So I think that's probably a good gauge. When you get this, all you need to do is pull the cap off of the top, and then you'll notice that that's going to expose the part that's going to go into the grill. And there's a notch here that we're going to use when we place it into the stove. And I'm going to try to show you what this looks like. And I think it might be easiest to do it this way. Melissa, we might have to move this down just a little bit. You just have to let me know. So when you open the stove, there's a little flap here. I'm going to take my butane. I'm going to match the flap. This might be easy to see this way, maybe. There we go. I'm going to match the flap and push this down just like this. And then there is a lever on the front that you push down, and that locks the butane into place. And then I just close the lid. Now, that's all of the preparation I need to do for this stove, besides turn it on. So there is a switch here that we use to turn it on. And I'm not going to do this because it's so close to my face right now, but I will show you in a few minutes. So what happens is you just push this knob all the way down, and it lights, and then you can adjust the burn here, how large you want the flame. So that's how easy one of these camp stoves is to use. So I'm going to put this back down in here and put this one to the side because I already have one ready for cooking today. Now, if you're using a camp stove, you do want to make sure that you have really good ventilation. It's best to use these outside, which a lot of times you're probably going to be outside in a disaster situation, just so that then you can get some air and movement. So I do suggest that you do this outside, but if you have a very well ventilated area like we do here in this conference room, if you're just doing maybe cooking one meal or two meals like the ones I'm going to show you, then it's okay. What we worry about is carbon monoxide poisoning if you're in an enclosed space. So you definitely need to be aware of that. You need to make sure that any of your loved ones know about that as well. The same thing goes for something like a generator that you might be using. You don't want that to be in an enclosed space because of carbon monoxide poisoning. When you get ready to store your butane, those little bottles, you're not supposed to store them inside. You are supposed to store them. You could put them in a garage. Some people have those little houses, utility sheds outside their house, and that's a safe place to store them. Even in our summer heat and the high temperatures that we get, it is okay to store butane. It can withstand that. Now, when you use the butane bottle and when you take it out, you'll notice that it'll start to sweat on the outside because butane burns as a cold gas. So it'll actually feel very cold to the touch rather than hot to the touch, which might kind of be confusing at first, but just to let you know. So that's kind of the safety guidelines that you want to go through if you're using a camp stove and if you're using butane. Make sure that you are storing them in a proper place. Okay, so what I'd like to do now is just pause really quickly and see if anybody has questions about the stove that we're using today, or any questions about storing food safely before I move on to the recipes. Okay, if you think of anything, please type that into the chat box and we'll be happy to get to them as we go through this. The other thing that you're going to receive besides the information from the Food and Drug Administration about how to safely store food and how to boil water and keep water safe is I'll be sending you also a file that has these recipes. So if you just want to watch and follow along, don't feel like you have to write down the ingredients or how much of everything, because I'm going to be sending you some sheets for each one of these recipes. It will have a picture of all of the ingredients. It will tell you how much, and it actually has step-by-step directions. And then on the back, it'll have a picture of the finished product, and it will also have on here some alternatives. So let's just say that you don't have a camp stove like the one I'm going to use today. What would be an alternative to that? So I just want you to know that before we move forward so that you don't feel like you have to write everything down. So we're going to go ahead and get started with our first recipe today. It's called an orzo pasta salad with black beans and corn. So I've got my stove set up here. And prior to our start of our call today, I went ahead and started to boil this water. So it should be kind of hot already, but let me just show you real quickly because it's been off the stove for a while. So the first thing I'm going to do is I want to make the orzo pasta. And so this is what the orzo container looks like. It just is this is one, it's a great value from Walmart. You can make 2 of these recipes with this 1 box of orzo. This is very inexpensive. It has a very long shelf life. So you can actually store this at home or in your disaster kit for quite some time. And that's one of the reasons I like to use this. Then if you only use half of this box, you can just put the rest of it into an airtight container or a Ziploc bag, and you can use it again, the next week, the next couple of days, whatever you want to do. All right, so this is what we need the camp stove for, is the orzo. And so the first thing we do in this particular recipe is we have water. We have 6 to 8 cups of water, and I measured all of that out using my measuring cup, and that was earlier today. So I'm just going to kind of pretend like I'm dumping it in there. So I have 8 cups of water in this particular bowl, and I've already started to warm it up, but I do still need for it to get to boiling before I can add the orzo. So I'm going to turn my camp stove back on, and I'm going to get this hot again. Let me just show you how the flame is pretty small. I don't know if you can see the blue there, but the flame is pretty small. And I'm just going to stick my pot right on the top, and I'm going to allow the water to get warm enough to boil. Now, while I'm doing that, while I'm waiting for this to heat up and to boil so that I can put the pasta in, I'm going to go ahead and start preparing other parts of this recipe. So you heard me say that this was a black bean and corn. So what you're going to want from the grocery store to go in your Go kit are two cans. One is black beans and one is corn. And both of these, you can either, I choose to drain these. Some people don't like it drained, but I like it drained. So what I've done with the black beans is I've poured them through a colander and I've actually drained the black beans and I've gone ahead and put those into the bowl. Okay, so I'm going to do that while I'm waiting again for my water to boil. So let's do the corn together just so that you can see the process that I used. Notice that both of my cans do not have pop tops, and I did that on purpose. Now you can get pop tops. That makes it easier if you are in a disaster situation, but a lot of times it's a little less expensive to buy cans that do not have a pop top. So you're definitely going to want a can opener. And today, when I went to get my can opener out of the disaster kit that I usually use as a demonstration, I noticed that it was broken. So you might want to make sure that you check your can openers and make sure that they still work. So I just use a manual can opener. Always have that in your disaster kit. And then this is my corn. Now my corn, again, it has a lot of juice in there. And so I don't really want all of that juice in my salad. So I'm going to put it in a strainer. Make sure that you can see this here. And I'm just going to strain the corn just like this. If you want to, you can rinse it under water, but in a disaster situation, you're probably not going to have a lot of additional water. And so you're just going to want to have your, you're just going to want to have a way to strain this, and you don't actually have to put water over it. Okay, and that also keeps some of the flavor in. So now I'm going to add the corn. Now that it is strained, I'm going to put it right in with the black beans. So now at the start of my recipe, I have just the corn and just the black beans. So I'm going to make sure you can see that here. Okay. And I'm actually going to be adding a lot of things to this, but that's the first things. Now, the black beans are going to give you protein, right? And you're going to need that if you want to have, in a disaster situation, you need to make sure that you have plenty of protein for you and your family. So the black beans are giving you the protein, the corn is giving you that vegetable, but it's also adding a little bit of a sweetness to it. And this is not creamed corn. This is actually sweet corn kernels, just to let you know. And so those are my first two ingredients that I've added to my bowl here. Okay. So the next thing that you want to do is continue to add the sort of the dry ingredients. And so if you have in your refrigerator or in your garden, and you are just trying to use fresh ingredients first within that first 72 hours after a disaster, then one fresh ingredient that you can use for this particular recipe is a bell pepper. So this is one red bell pepper. I have pre-cut this on my cutting board here just to make things go a little faster for us today. But the red bell pepper is going to add a lot of different vitamins and nutrients that are very good for you. Typically, this kind of pepper has a little bit less of a spicy flavor. So if you have children in your family, they're going to like this. I've had my kids help cook this exact recipe with me, and they actually really do like the red bell peppers. So red bell peppers, I just need one, and I'm going to add that to my mixture. Okay. If you don't have a red bell pepper, that's okay. This recipe is fine without it, so don't worry about that. But if you're trying to use up any kind of a fresh ingredient because you know it's not going to last very long outside of the refrigerator, then feel free to do that. Okay, the next ingredient that I'm going to add is, again, something you can find from your garden or, again, a fresh ingredient. And remember that even things, so this is parsley, even items like parsley, you can actually freeze and then you can get these things out. You could use parsley for this. You could use cilantro for this. Again, you're just adding a little bit of flavor to the overall recipe. So I've actually already cut some parsley, and in this case, I'm going to need 1/4 of a cup of parsley. So if you can see this in my little measuring cup, I've already cut it today, and I'm going to dump this into my bowl just like that. So now I have a really,
Hey,
actually very
are
pretty.
y'all coming back to pick us up?
very pretty
Oh,
arrangement.
I didn't even know you were back there.
Oh, I think we got somebody else. There we go. Thank you. Okay, so here is what it's gonna look like prior to adding the pasta salad. Okay, so now my water has already boiled. And part of that, it usually takes 10 to 12 minutes with this much water. So don't be fooled. It really will take a little bit longer for this to boil, but I had it already hot. So I'm going to take the lid off here and hope that we don't make our smoke alarm go off in our office suite. And I'm going to add the orzo to the boiling water. And again, I'm adding like half of the box. If you want to measure it out, you can. But I just use half the box, and that seems to work well. I'm going to add the lid back, and now I'm going to let the orzo cook. I'm going to make sure that my flame is still on, and that's the one thing you do have to check on these camp stoves is that sometimes if you turn it down too low, it will, yeah, it will go off, which is what had happened here. So you have to just turn it right back on and then slowly turn it back up. Okay, so now our orzo is in here, and we have all of our, we have our corn, we have our black beans, we have our bell pepper, and we have our parsley in this bowl. So now while the orzo is cooking, because that's the only thing I really need to heat up, while our orzo is cooking, I'm actually going to make the balsamic vinaigrette that we're going to place in the salad to give it that nice flavor. And so what I'm going to use for the balsamic vinaigrette, first of all, is some extra virgin olive oil. And I need 3 tablespoons of this. And so I'm going to, again, just do this in a bowl. The olive oil, again, has long shelf life. It can be in your disaster kit. I'm just adding 3 tablespoons, and that's it. That's all of the olive oil that I need. And then I'm going to add an equal amount of balsamic vinegar. I'm gonna have to turn this down because it's getting too, it's going too much. There we go. There we go. So you're going to add equal amounts of olive oil and balsamic vinaigrette. So here's my balsamic vinaigrette. These little camp stoves do get hot, so it's a good thing. You want it to cook your pasta. So now I've got 3 tablespoons here of the balsamic vinaigrette. Okay, and to that mixture, I'm going to add some garlic salt. This is just the generic Great Value. Garlic salt works perfect. And I need 3/4 of this. So I'm going to put, this is a 1/4 teaspoon. So I need 3/4 of a teaspoon. So I'm just going to add that to my mixture. And then I'm going to need 1/4 of the freshly ground black pepper. So I've got that in a different. So I'm going to add that here. And really for some of this, like you don't necessarily have to measure it out. Like a lot of this, you can probably just add to your taste, to your liking. So now I've got the 3 tablespoons of olive oil, 3 tablespoons of balsamic vinaigrette. I've got the garlic salt at 3/4 of a teaspoon, and I have the ground pepper. And I'm just gonna, here we go, I'm just gonna mix that together. And this is gonna be my dressing that I'm gonna pour over that salad. And that's gonna give it a really nice, rich flavor. So I'm gonna come back over here and kind of check on my orzo. Let's see if it looks like it's almost done. It needs just a second, so I'm gonna let it stay in here for just another second. And while this is continuing to cook, I can go ahead and add because it doesn't matter what order you do this in, I can go ahead and add my dressing to this bowl. So I'm going to go ahead and do that and just get all that good dressing, homemade dressing. And think about all of those ingredients I just used to make this dressing, again, all have a very long shelf life. They can all be in your disaster kit, and it gives you a nice new flavors. It is a whole lot better than eating these things out of the can without any kind of real, taste or additional taste to it. Okay, So the only thing that's missing now is the orzo. And so I'm going to go ahead and turn off my stove. And I'm going to drain the orzo, drain the water. So let me show you. I'm going to just use my same bowl here. I'm going to stick a stringer in there. And I'm going to use some hot pads. Don't forget to use your hot pads, and don't forget to turn your stove off. And I'm just going to pour this in here like this. It's going to get nice and steamy in here. So I'm trying to do it slow so I don't make our fire alarm go off, and because we don't really have a hood or any way to ventilate. But if you're doing this outside, you won't have to worry about that. And that should get the rest of my orzo in there. Okay, so now I've got my cooked orzo, and I'm straining it really good. Okay, and now I can pour this into my salad over here. And you can kind of put however much you want. If you want to use all the orzo, that's great. If you don't want to use all the orzo, that's okay as well. And so here, I'm going to put this over there. So here is the orzo. Here's all the other ingredients that we mixed together. So what I'm going to do now is just mix all of those together. And look how nice of a pasta salad. And really all I had to do was heat up or boil some water. Now, let's pretend like you don't have a camp stove. Let's pretend like you don't have electricity still, and you want to do a modified version of this same recipe. Well, you can do that. So if you don't have a way to boil water, like on a small camp stove like this, then you can make something that my family for years has called Southern caviar. And it still requires you to have canned goods like the ones that we just used, except for instead of the black beans, I typically use black-eyed peas. And so for that recipe, and I'm going to also send that one to you as part of the orzo pasta salad, but it's a modification in case you don't have any kind of heating source. You can just use the black-eyed peas and the corn. So that's kind of the base. And instead of making the balsamic vinaigrette, you use some Italian dressing. Again, has a long shelf life. You just put a little bit of that in there. And then to kind of get that other flavor, like how we use the red fresh bell pepper, you can just use a can of like Rotel tomatoes that are diced up. And that works just as well. And you can put a little bit of onion in there if you have it. If not, you don't have to. But again, you're still getting the flavors, but you're not actually having to put the pasta. You're not having to cook the pasta. So I'm going to pause right there. Melissa and I and other folks in our office will be able to enjoy this later. I wish that you all could enjoy it with us.
Smells good.
Yeah, but since we're online, I'm sorry we can't do that today, but hopefully you can cook this in your kitchen very soon. I want to pause before we move on to the second recipe though, and just see if anyone has any questions. And again, I'll just leave it right here so you can kind of see what our finished product looks like. Any questions about what we did to make the orzo pasta salad? Or any questions about some substitutions that you might want to use if you don't have electricity? Okay, do we have a question online?
We have a hand raised.
Oh, a hand raise. Okay. You want to come off mute? Is there someone with a hand raised that wants to come off mute? Okay. If not, that's okay.
I do have a question.
Okay.
How did you turn the stove on again?
Okay, so good question. Let me move the stove around, see if I can make this a little bit easier to see. This one I'm going to use, well, this one's okay. So I'm just going to see if you can see the face of the stove here. So right here, there's a button. You'll see this, and all you do is turn this button and it lights. So let me push it away from myself, but you light it, and then that's all you do. And then this controls the flame, and then you can make the flame go off. So really all you're doing is turning a knob once you put the butane in there. And that's one of the things I really love about these stoves is they're just that easy to use. Um, I know you can actually order a similar stove on Amazon because I've had someone look that up before. So there's a lot of options, but this is just the one that I use in my classes, and it comes from Walmart. It has very few pieces, so it's hard to mess things up.
You do have one question in the chat,
Okay.
and it says, what was the substitution for the orzo pasta without the burner?
Okay, so without the burner, what you're going to do is you're going to make something that I call Southern caviar. And so you don't use the orzo at all. Instead, what you do is you use like some black-eyed peas that are canned. You use corn that is canned. And then you get a 10-ounce can of Rotel tomatoes that are diced and drained. And that kind of makes up your base, like what we made just a few minutes ago. And then if you want to add things like an onion or a green bell pepper or something, you're welcome to do that. Certainly you could add the parsley like what we did. But then instead of having like the orzo salad, what I do is I put zesty Italian dressing, and that's just the bottle of the dressing on there. And then we take those scoops or any kind of chip that you have, and we actually eat it with scoops. So like the chip is kind of replacing the pasta, if that helps. I forgot to mention that part. So we do use the chips. You could put that same mixture into a tortilla and eat it. There's a lot of different things that you wouldn't have to have a burner for. So hopefully that helps answer your question. Good question. Okay. Any other questions before we move on to the second recipe? You see anything else on there, Melissa?
Just a thank you.
Okay, great. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and move on to the second recipe, which is actually something that I find that my kids like a lot. And I'm also going to talk about some substitutions with this recipe. So this one is called grilled pizza sandwiches, but we might be using some items that you might not normally use when you make pizza. So I'll move this over. The first thing I want to do is show you how the griddle attachment works on this particular stove, because I'm going to use it for this. If you don't have a griddle attachment, you can actually use an aluminum pie plate or any other. You can actually get a skillet from your kitchen and use it. But notice here's my eye, and all I'm going to do is it fits right in there. And notice like it doesn't go very far. I can move it back and forth, but I can feel that it's in place. So I know that it's on there very good. Okay. And I'm going to use that for the grilled pizza sandwiches. Now for this particular recipe, again, there's lots of substitutions, but let me show you what I'm going to use. I like to use English muffins for the base of my sandwich. English muffins are great because they're a good healthy choice, but also if you were in a disaster situation, you knew that your electricity might go off, these are something that you can easily put into your freezer, and then that gives you another couple of days that you can use these, and they will stay fresh. The other thing I should mention is that if you are putting things in your freezer, it's really good if you fill your freezer, because the more compact and the more things you have in your freezer, the better. And so you just want to make sure you have plenty of stuff in your freezer that will keep things solid, and it will keep them, they'll stay fresh longer. Okay, so because I don't have the griddle on right now, I'm just going to put a plate out here so you can see what I'm doing. And I'm going to take one English muffin out of that bag. And some English muffins are already cut. This one I needed to kind of give a little bit of help here. Cut it in two, and I'm going to set it on a plate just like this so that I have two halves of my English muffin. Okay. And unlike what you might normally think to do, instead of spraying the griddle, I'm actually going to spray the bottom of the English muffin. So this is my cooking spray. And instead of spraying the actual griddle, like instead of doing like spraying here, I'm not going to do that. So I didn't spray here. I'm actually going to spray, I'm going to flip over the bottom of the English muffin, And I'm going to spray the bottoms of the English muffin just like that. Just put a little bit on there so that then they don't stick to the griddle. Okay, and then I'm going to move this back up here so you can see it a little bit better. So I'm going to flip this over. I have now sprayed the bottom of my English muffin, so it's got cooking spray. I'm now going to take some pizza sauce. Again, this pizza sauce has a long shelf life, so this is a great thing for you to put in your disaster good kit. I'm going to take this spoon and I'm just, some people like a lot of sauce, some people don't like a lot of sauce. That's really up to you. You put the kind of sauce. Some people like to use like different kinds of marinara or Alfredo even. But for this particular recipe, we're putting marinara sauce on the English muffin. Now, if you wanted to use something besides an English muffin, then you could use a tortilla. You could use a piece of bread. There's a lot of other things you could use. Really, if you're low on groceries, you're just going to use whatever you've got, whatever kind of bread or base that you have. But this is what it looks like with an English muffin. All right. After you get the sauce on there, you're going to place some pepperonis and cheese, which I have actually in the refrigerator. So I'm going to have to run, yeah, if you don't mind, thank you. And then we're just going to place some pepperonis and some cheese. Now, the reason I like to use the pepperoni is because you can purchase the pepperoni in the store without it being refrigerated. So until you open it, it does have a long shelf life, and then it also gives you some protein. So I think that pepperoni is a really good option for this particular recipe, but you could use a lot of other types of protein if you wanted to. Some of the recipes that I have for this use a lot of canned meats. So thank you so much, Melissa. Forgot to grab that out of there. But for this one, we're just going to use the pepperoni. And of course, once you've opened it, you do need to refrigerate it. But for your disaster meal kit, you really don't have to do that. If you'll notice in the grocery store, you can purchase the pepperonis off the regular shelf. You don't have to get them, or you can get them in the refrigerated section. Okay, so I'm putting 3 to 4 pepperonis on here on each one of these. And again, that's up to you. If your kids don't like meat, then you can, of course, just do like a cheese pizza. And then this is where I was talking about how you can put your cheeses in the freezer if you choose to. So this mozzarella is refrigerated, but let's say that you don't have mozzarella, or let's say that maybe the power has been out for a long time and you still have all these other ingredients that you could make the pizza sandwiches with, but you don't have any cheese that is good, then you could choose to use something like Parmesan. It's going to have a little bit of a different taste to it, but Parmesan, again, if you haven't opened it and it's just on the shelf, has a long shelf life, so you could just get the Parmesan out and you could use that. So now I've actually constructed my 2 pizza sandwiches, and I'm going to place these on my griddle, excuse me. And I have not started the griddle yet, so I'm putting them on here cold. If you've got a lot of these to make, then of course, it's okay if it's warm. I just like to make sure that if I'm having kids help me with this, that I'm very careful about having the grill on and when it's still being hot. So the only other thing you're going to need besides this griddle is going to be a spatula. That's what you're going to use to turn this. You're going to turn your burner on, and again, I can show you what that looks like. The burner is on, and then this is just sitting right on top of it, but it's in the little notches, so it's very stable. And so now I'm going to keep my 2 halves of my sandwich on here for about 1.5 minutes. I'm going to let them get nice and warm, kind of get that cheese to start melting. And then once we do that, I actually like to flip it on top, and I like to have just like one sandwich that's nicely browned on both sides. But again, that's a personal preference. Some people like to eat open face sandwiches like this, and that's perfectly acceptable. So if you'd rather have an open face sandwich, please feel free to do that. So as you're cooking these, again, this is something that you can do with your children, even younger members of your family. And typically it's something that they will eat. It gives them some protein. It has a little bit different of a base. So it's actually a little bit more filling. But if you wanted to use bread, if you want to use your tortilla, again, you can use a different base. You just kind of use whatever you have available to you. These are just going to get brown. The reason that I don't put the cooking spray right on top of the griddle is that I found that, at least with these smaller camp stoves, because they cook so hot at one time, that it typically just makes it more smoky. So that's why I put it on the bottom of each one of these. And you can move them around on the grill. It's a nice flat cooking surface. It does a really nice job of keeping everything warm. And this might be something that you've done before with kids. If you don't have this griddle attachment, then again, you can use a skillet that you have from home. You can use a pie plate. The only thing I would tell you is that if you are going to use something like an aluminum pie plate, because that's disposable, again, that might be something you have in your disaster kit. If you're going to use a pie plate, just know that that aluminum is going to heat up really quickly on the single burner. So if you're cooking this same exact meal, like these same pizza sandwiches, you're probably going to find that there's a lot of smoke and that it might get brown on the bottom very quickly. And that's just because the aluminum heats up so quickly. So just be aware of that, but it's a perfectly fine thing to do. Okay, so these are starting, I can tell that the cheese is starting to get a little bit warm. It's starting to melt. I have this on the highest setting on the griddle, but if you see that it's getting too brown or too black, hopefully not black, but if it's getting, if it's not getting burned, hopefully, but if you see that it looks like it's doing that, all you have to do is turn the dial and turn the stove off just a little bit. And then when you kind of get it to the point that you feel like, okay, this is looking pretty good, then you can flip the two pieces using make sure you have a hot pad on top of one another. And you can kind of see how nice and brown the bottom of this English muffin got. And then you can kind of leave it on the griddle, get it nice and warm on the other side, and then we'll flip it. You really just do this until the cheese starts to melt. And then when it's a good gooiness for you, then you can take it off. And then it's ready to eat. And this is nice because you just eat it with your hands. You don't really need a lot of additional silverware or anything to eat it. And this makes for a really nice little meal for disaster prep. So I'm going to flip this and see how good I can flip it. Not that great, but it's getting there. And again, I'm doing this in about 1.5 minute intervals because I'm talking. It's probably been a little bit longer than 1.5 minutes. And you can just do that until you're pleased with it. And then always remember when you're around these camp stoves to turn them off. So to turn off the burner. And then I'm just going to put this right back on the plate that I used to prepare it. And now I'm ready to go with my pizza sandwich. So these are two very easy meals that are I think, super I just think that these are something that pretty much any age can put together and have. And so if what I will do is I will email both of these recipes. If you're interested in this particular grill that I'm using, the one from Walmart, this one is actually an Ozark Trail, which I think must be one of their name brands. But again, I'm using butane. You could do the same things if you have a grill in your backyard. Propane burns much warmer, much hotter, at a much higher degree than butane does. And so, but you can also use a grill to do some of these in your backyard. I use this because grills are still pretty expensive, and purchasing those big propane tanks is expensive, whereas I feel like this is a little bit more of an affordable option, which is why I wanted to demonstrate with it today. So I will take any questions that you might have about, how we might think about preparing for disasters, other kinds of meals, maybe things that you have cooked before. But that is, in a nutshell, in less than an hour, what are we, about 45 minutes, we've got two really good meals that you can cook with your family in a disaster situation. right, do I have any questions from anybody online? Any comments? Feel free to take yourself off mute. I think we have a small enough crowd that we can do that. If we don't have any questions, I really would appreciate if you all could fill out an evaluation for me. We want to know if this information was useful to you so that then we'll know if this was a good way to demonstrate. Like I said, this is the first time we've tried to do it virtually. So if you have some suggestions for improvements, we would appreciate that. And I believe Christiana is going to put the link to that evaluation. Great. Thank you, Christiana, in the chat box. And also, if there are some other things that you would like for us to look at, like let's say that there's a meal that your family really likes and you're not sure how to modify it to work in a situation like this, please let me know. I'd be more than happy to take a look at that and see what we can do. I will ask Christiana if she doesn't mind putting my email address and also her email address, because Christiana and I both work on the disaster training. So if you don't mind putting those in the chat, Christiana, that would be great. That way people can contact us afterwards if they have any questions. So we appreciate you sticking with us today, and I'll hang around for a few more minutes in case anybody has questions. Thank you for putting that in the chat, Christiana. Okay, well, thank you for being with us today. And we hope to see you at another one of our Coast Resilience Institute offerings. Have a great afternoon.